Mac Power Users, episode 571. Catching up with Jeff Richardson. Hello, everyone. This is David Sparks. I am joined by my co-host, Mr. Stephen Hackett. How are you today, Stephen?
I'm great, David. It's snowing here in the South today, so I don't
What?
know what to do.
Snow?
Yeah, snow. I just sat in my kitchen and looked out the window for like 30 minutes before the show.
Yeah, I understand that that's a real problem in communities that aren't used to snow.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that, like you don't have like the snow plows and the salt and everything.
The city has like 3 sand trucks. It's not enough. So it's not going to be a big event. It's not quite cold enough, but it looks pretty. So that's fun.
Are the kids playing in it?
Yes, they are. They're on their lunch break currently. They're running around the yard trying to scrape enough together to make a snowball.
Yeah, it's kind of sad, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if it snowed in Southern California, literally everything would just explode. We have no ability to cope with it. But that's unlikely, I think. Hey, we're joined today by a guest. Welcome to the show, Jeff Richardson.
Thanks for having me here. I'm here in New Orleans, so like you, David, I'm not exactly sure what this thing called snow. Is that how you pronounce it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you have like snow anywhere near you in New Orleans? I mean, I would assume probably not, right? I mean,
we
no
get
mountains.
Snowflakes once every couple of years. We actually had a white Christmas, barely, in 2004, which seems special. And then a few months later, we had Hurricane Katrina. So now nobody wants that to happen again. So
it is. We are so spoiled in Southern California because we have mountains, local mountains that get lots of snow. And I remember as a kid one day, I woke up really early and went surfing. And then me and my friends drove up to the mountains and went sledding on the same day, and that's what you can do here. Although you need a wetsuit in the winter. It's pretty cool.
Crazy.
Either way, Jeff Richardson I'll call you a friend, Jeff. You and I have known each other a long time. We've spoken together. Jeff's an attorney out of New Orleans. New Orleans? Did I get it right? New Orleans?
New Orleans.
All right. And he started a website at the very beginning of the iPhone called iPhone JD. And this is like a mega site for lawyers. So many lawyers go to iPhone JD to see how to use their iPhone to be more productive. And Jeff and I have spoken together at various conferences. And the thing about Jeff is he's not just a lawyer. He's a guy who's a nerd and loves to share good workflows for getting more work done with your mobile devices. Jeff is also one of those guys that has to work on a PC and a Mac at the same time. And we had you on the show several years ago, Jeff, and it was a very popular show. A lot of people have asked to have you back. I know a lot of your workflows have changed. So thanks for giving us a little time and coming back on the Mac Power Users.
Great. Thanks for inviting me back. I love this show. Listen every week.
Excellent. So I guess we should start. Actually, before we get into the thick of it today, I just want to take a minute to talk about more power users. Stephen and I mentioned that a few weeks ago. And several listeners have been signing up for it as we've kind of been talking about it a little bit more, and we've got some great content on more power users today. Stephen and I and Jeff are going to go into the Apple Car because now that's a thing again, apparently.
Mm-hmm. So it seems.
I'm not sure how I feel about it, but I've got a little time to gather my thoughts before we get to that.
Yeah, it should be fun.
Either way, so you kind of made your claim to fame in the little Apple ecosystem talking about iPhone JD. So I think let's start with your iPhone. What iPhone are you using these days?
Yeah, when I started iPhone JD over 12 years ago, it was called that because that's all we had was the iPhone. And I've used every one of the iPhones over the years. I'm currently using the iPhone 12 Pro. Basically, whenever the new models come out, I pretty much always get the new one every single year. So whatever comes out in fall of 2021, I'm sure I'll be getting that too. And but I like it. I like it a lot. I like the iPhone 12 Pro. I was very excited about this design because of the flat sides. One of my all-time favorite iPhones was the iPhone 5. I'm sure y'all remember that, which had the flat sides. I actually think the iPhone 5 was a little easier to hold in your hand than the new iPhone 12 Pro, because the iPhone 5 and 5S and all them had those chamfered edges, if I'm using that word correctly. So it was just a tiny bit of a little edge on the corners, which made it just a little bit more comfortable. But I've been so happy with the iPhone 12 Pro that I don't need to use a case. Every once in a while I use one, but it just makes it so much lighter and smaller to be able to, because of the flat sides, to be able to hold it more easily without a case. So I like that. I also really love the multiple cameras on it, which is the main reason that I get the Pro model instead of the regular model, is that I like being able to, I do a lot of photography just for fun, and I like the telephoto lens.
We get a lot of feedback on this show. I don't know that we've heard from a single listener that doesn't like the new design of the iPhone.
Yeah, it seems really, really well received. And I think a lot of people like you, Jeff, it harkens back to sort of the golden age, like the 4, 5 sort of era. And yeah, I have the same feeling. Like I pick it up and it's like, this is just really nice, and it's not slippery. So it doesn't shoot out of my hands like, the iPhone 6 style did.
Although, Jeff, you are absolutely wrong. The best iPhone ever was the iPhone 4 in terms of design. So,
well, sure, but that had the flat edge too. In my mind, it was the 4 and then the 5 series. The 5 just got a little bit taller. My slight preference for the 5 over the 4 was just to get a little bit more screen space without getting into the mega huge screens that today you would get with the Max model.
Is that why you don't have the Max? You mentioned photography.
Yeah, it's just too big for me. I mean, I don't need something the size of a shoe holding up to my head when I talk on the phone. It's great that it's out there, but when I want to get bigger, I move on to an iPad.
Yeah, I grew up watching Maxwell Smart. Give me my shoe. That's what I say. I do think one of the reasons why it's a little more cumbersome with the flat sides than it was with the 4 and the 5 is frankly because the phone is bigger and heavier. Even the standard iPhone 12 Pro is bigger and heavier.
Yeah. Otherwise, though, I mean, the other features of it, I mean, obviously it's faster than the other models, which is always nice. The thing that everybody, at the keynote, they said 5G, 5G, 5G a million different times. Mm-hmm. Right now, for me at least, 5G is a non-issues. Here in New Orleans, I use AT&T, and the sub-6 version of 5G, I find is rarely faster than LTE, and sometimes is even slower when I do little speed tests myself. And I know that you get that super fast 5G speed with the millimeter wave stuff. And sometimes I'll see people post on Twitter, the test that they just ran on Speed Test that has, ridiculously fast speeds. But I have yet to find one of those in New Orleans. And I understand you sort of need to be outside to really even take advantage of it. I mean, I think 5G is going to be cool in the future, but we're not there yet. In my mind, if Apple was going to add something to this phone instead of 5G, I frankly sort of wish it had been a Touch ID button like they put on the iPad Air, because during the pandemic, it'd be great to be able to unlock the phone when I'm in the grocery store with my finger, as opposed to having to type in my long passcode. But otherwise, I love it a lot.
Do you guys ever I know of course we always want it faster, but do you have problems on your phone where it's not fast enough to do whatever it is you need?
No. I mean, I don't think I've felt that way in a long time.
No, with a caveat, though, which is that whenever I will go back, often my phones get passed on to other members of my family. And so I'll go back and look at the phone that my son or my daughter is using, and I'll pick it up just to do something. And I'm like, wow, everything is being so slow and non-responsive. And of course, if it's not, you just sort of grow used to the faster speed. I mean, I'm sure the same is true with the M1 Max. Once you get used to the faster speed, you're like, how could I possibly use an Intel Mac? That's why I'm not using an M1 Mac yet.
Yeah, you shouldn't. It's the kiss of death if you pick one up. But but what I was actually referring to is the internet speed, like the prior LTE versus now the 5G is the new thing. I guess part of the problem is I'm rarely off Wi-Fi anymore because of the pandemic, but I just don't really notice that, boy, this YouTube video is really choppy, or the stuff I do on my phone. I just don't know that a faster internet connection is the problem that I have right now.
The big place that I notice it, David, is, and of course during the pandemic this isn't happening, but in the pre-times when we would actually travel places, for my iPad have never had, I have once in the past, but for a long time I haven't had the model that has cellular in it, because it's just so easy to tether to my iPhone. And when I'm doing a bunch of my iPad, I actually can notice when the speeds are slower. So that's one place that, in theory, the super fast 5G would be great if it could simulate, high speed Wi-Fi.
Yeah, back when I had my remote office at Disneyland, that is always a troublesome area for internet because there's so many people hitting it. And I do believe this millimeter band, one of the benefits of it is you could have a lot of people in a small area getting fast speed. I mean, that was kind of the idea behind it, like stadiums and theme parks.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking forward to seeing that. But to be honest, I really haven't had the need for additional internet speed, at least so far with this new phone.
Yeah, it just seems like 5G rolled out in sort of the most awkward time period possible for something like that to roll out in.
I suspect that the problem with the button, getting the Touch ID button is just a question of time and logistics. I mean, Apple makes millions of these phones, and my guess is that the design was locked in before COVID existed, and, saying let's add a Touch ID button in the last 6 months is pretty much impossible. I'll be very curious to see if they add one in 2021, though.
Agreed.
So let's talk a little bit about iOS 14. It's brought a lot of changes to the iPhone experience. I think for most people, that's taking the form in widgets. Jeff, has that changed the game for you in any ways?
Wow, that has been such a big thing for me, Stephen. I tell you, I look at my iPhone, as a way for me to be productive. In some ways, it's sort of like my extra brain. The things that I'm not going to remember myself, my iPhone is taking care of that for me, whether it's, schedules or whatever else. And widgets that's been such a huge change for me on the interface of the iPhone. I love that I can have the way that I have mine set up is I have 2 stacks on my first screen. The smallest version of the stacks, the 2x2, one at the top left and one at the top right. And the one at the top left, I just have 2 programs in there that I use that smart rotate feature that it just changes randomly throughout the day. And I have it switched between Fantastical, which is the app that I prefer to use for my calendar, and Things, which is my to-do app. And what I like about it is every time I look at my iPhone, and how many times a day do you pick up and just look at your iPhone to do something, it will either be showing me in the top left my upcoming calendar for the day, just so that I have in my brain, oh yeah, this is coming up at 2:00 or whatever, or I can usually fit a couple of the top 3 or 4 of my to-do items. So I'm just reminded, oh yeah, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. And it's, without nagging me, it's just sort of like having somebody next to me whispering in my ear, don't forget, Jeff, you got to get that Smith versus Jones case done today. Oh yeah, I have that lawsuit to work on. And I love that it's just there, always just showing me things. And then on my other stack, it's just a little more fun or just informational. I love that with widgets, you can have the same app have multiple widgets. So the Carrot Weather app, which I think is fantastic, that's my favorite weather app, although I have probably all of them on my iPhone someplace. I have one Carrot Weather widget, which has the upcoming, forecast, which is nice to know because in New Orleans, the weather's changing all the time. And I have another Carrot Weather widget, which has the radar. And you have to pay for a more premium subscription to get that, but it's not very expensive. And so I can just sort of look up and see, if there's rain, I can see a little map in the corner of my screen and just get a sense of how close it is to me, or maybe if it's raining right now, how much there's left before it goes away. And then the other things I have in that stack are the built-in Photos app, which just randomly displays some fantastic image from years in the past, which always brings a smile to my face when I see my kids back when they were young and cute. And I also have the Widgetsmith widget, and I'm currently using that just to display photos from one of my favorite albums. And so as a result, that top right of my iPhone, it's either giving me something about the weather, which is interesting to know, or it's just making me smile because I see some fun pictures of things that we did in the past or things that my kids did. And so between those 2 stacks on my first screen, it's just made the home screen of the iPhone so much better. I can't wait until they allow you to have this on the iPad for real. Right now, you can use it in a limited way. But I love it a lot. And then on my second screen of my iPhone, I have one of those huge widgets, the 4x4 one, that I'm using for the Shortcuts app because I like to use shortcuts for all sorts of things. And right now I have it that it's, got a number of shortcuts there that on the button that I can just tap, and I guess you can fit 8 on there. And so I can tap and launch a shortcut. And so far that's been working fine. I've actually thought about changing it to something that I think, David, you actually recommended in the past, of where you take advantage of the shortcuts feature of having menus and stuff. And I may do that to sort of create a launcher type experience. But so the shortcuts stack is nice. I'm using it. It's fine. But the way that those stacks on my first screen have just, it's been one of the biggest changes in the interface of the iPhone for me in years. It's been huge.
Yeah, the question with the shortcut stack is how many shortcuts do you actually use? I mean, if you only use 4 or 8, then just make a widget and have it directly to those shortcuts. But I mean, honestly, there's like 50 shortcuts that I regularly launch, and having to choose from menu kind of selection thing I do makes more sense for someone that uses a lot more. Also on the photos widget, I just wanted to make the comment, if people haven't tried it yet, that you should give that widget a try. I can't get over how good it is at surfacing really good pictures that I'd forgot about. I mean, you have the pictures that you've marked as favorites, but this algorithm doesn't use that. It seems to be, I'm not sure how it figures it out, but
I think it uses the memories feature. So, sometimes it'll be, here's something cool that you did on this day 10 years ago. Or sometimes if it's somebody's birthday, I'm sure their picture is going to show up and remind me that should send them a text to say happy birthday. So I think it's the same type of AI they use for memories, but it works great, doesn't it?
yeah, I mean, just the other day, I turned to my phone and there was a picture of me and Steven from some relay event several years ago on my phone, and it just made me smile, and you get the same thing with your kids and your spouse and your friends, and it really is a widget worth giving a try, because it's not as simple as you may think it is.
Yeah. In fact, the whole memories feature in Photos, I love it because, Apple recognizes that it's so easy to have digital photographs and it's so easy to get to the point you have, hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands. But then you have so many. How do you find them? And you can search for them if you want to. But I love that it just sort of, here's one that might be interesting. And sometimes, it's something not that interesting, but more times than often, it's just delightful, which is just such an Apple thing, just, surprise and delight.
Yeah, I've mentioned this before on the show, and I know that during COVID, you're unlikely to have a lot of guests, but anytime we have family over, inevitably we all end up on the couch in the Photos app on the Apple TV, just going through the memories, because it feeds up those memories on your Apple TV as well. And that's kind of one of those nice things about having all the Apple stuff, where everything just ties together. But my mother-in-law in particular just loves to look at all those memories, and it generates the short little, kind of movies with the Ken Burns effect, sliding between the pictures, and put some music up. And it's a very popular feature in the Sparks house.
In fact, one thing that's fun about that is that when it shows a photo, sometimes is it called live photos? The idea that it records a few seconds of video with it. There may be a photo that I've looked at in the past and I know it's there, but I forget until Apple puts together a little memories video that there's actually, a couple seconds to video there, and actually, not just see somebody, at the beach, but I could see them jumping up and down in the waves for a second or two. And it's just brilliant how Apple's put that together.
Yeah. And with puppies and little kids, you should have live photos turned on all the time. I'm just going to say, because years later, you will really enjoy those short videos. You'd mentioned that one of the advantages for you with the new iPhone was the better camera system. What are your favorite ways to use the camera?
I don't know that I'm doing anything fancy with the camera. I keep the live photos turned on. I have started to play around with the raw photography that they've just come out with, within the last couple of weeks. But as of yet, I haven't, there's a couple times that I'm taking a picture that I'm like, I'll take it in raw too, in case I want to do something with that later. But I haven't quite done that. But the main thing for me with the iPhone is just to take as many pictures as possible, at events, because, I'll go through them later on my iPad and I'll take 50 pictures and, call that down to just the 2 or 3 good ones. But when you take a bunch of them, then you have those good ones. Whereas I have the fancy DSLR camera, my Nikon camera, and I will use that when I know that I'm going to take, the nice picture for like the Christmas card every year or something like that. But just the serendipity of the camera that's with you all the time, that you can capture any moment, is great. And again, things are a little different now in the pandemic, but even so, we still do fun things together as just my more immediate family. And I love having a camera with me all the time.
Yeah, this was the first year that my family, we took our Christmas card picture with an iPhone. Just now, I hadn't even really thought about it at the time, but that was what I had with me, and I knew it was a good camera. What are some of your favorite iPhone apps, Jeff?
Well, one thing that I sort of consider essential is, as an attorney, someone who bills my time by the hour, and I know there's many other professions that bill time by the hour too. I think having an app that you can enter your time right there on your iPhone is incredibly useful. The one that I'm currently using is called iTimekeep, but depending upon the time entry system that you have, there's many other apps that do it. The key for me is when you have to record your time, which is a drab. That's the worst part of practicing law. But to do it, you want to be able to enter time contemporaneously so that you don't forget about it later. Because not only are you being paid for your time, but also when you send clients a bill, it's sort of like a diary of what you've done, and you sort of want to capture to show the steps of what you've done. But then additionally, it's nice that at the end of the day, you're like, oh yeah, I totally forgot that I talked to John Smith for 30 minutes earlier today. And so, I might even be in bed and I'll just pick up my iPhone off of my bedstand and just put in the time entry. So that's a great app that I encourage you to have.
Now, is iTimekeep, is it like a back-end web service, or is it just a time tracking app?
No, it works with other time entry systems, and so we've used it for many years at my firm, something called Elite. There's lots of fancy lawyer time entry systems, and it will work with others. But then many time entry systems have their own app, just depending upon what you're using. My real encouragement is to have this on your phone. Don't have time entry just be something that you do in front of your computer, because you won't be as successful with it.
Yeah.
Another app that I use, all the time, and I think they actually may be a sponsor today, is 1Password. On last week's show, when y'all talked about security, y'all mentioned, how important 1Password is. I mean, I cannot possibly highlight and underline that enough, especially if you're someone like me who folks hire to get things done. I mean, they depend upon you being safe and secure. And so having complex, unique passwords that you don't have to remember yourself is so important. But I don't just use 1Password for passwords. It's also like I like that there's a notepad in there that things that are, incredibly confidential, but that I want to have, again, back to my iPhone being my second brain, I can jot something down in there. This is the settlement authority that a client has given me for a lawsuit, or other, medical information, or things that are just truly private. Not that anybody is picking up my phone to look at notes, but I just like having a really secure place to put it. So I can't talk about 1Password enough.
Yeah, I do the same thing with my medical stuff. Like when I go to the
Sure.
doctor, I have a 1Password note that has like all of my prior appointments and the medications I take, and blah blah blah. And because I just have one of those brains that can't remember the names of medications. I don't know
Yeah,
what,
same.
whatever that defect is, I have it. But having it in a secure note is really good, because I just want a second wall between someone picking up my phone and getting that kind of data.
Another one that I use a lot is an app called Deliveries, and it keeps track of things that are being delivered to you. You basically, you take the Amazon deliveries or whatever other service, when you get the UPS or FedEx or whatever the tracking number is, you just copy it. And when you open up the Deliveries app, it senses that it's on the clipboard, and it helps you create very quickly an entry for that. And I like it because when something starts to ship to me, I can just stick it in there and not worry about it. And it will, give me updates, or I can always go back in there and check. And gosh, especially during the pandemic, where, more stuff's being ordered from places like Amazon and less shopping in individual stores. It's great to have a central place just to know, where is this? What's the current status? When is it coming? It's a very useful app.
Now, Steven, you strike me as the kind of guy that would have like a very serious delivery tracking workflow.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I use Deliveries. It's fantastic. I've tried all the other apps that do this, and it's really great. And you can sync it with iCloud or their own cloud system. I use theirs. And it's fantastic because it syncs to all of your devices. You can add something on your Mac and pick it up on your phone or whatever. I've used it for a long time. I think it started life as a dashboard widget, if I remember correctly.
It did.
And so from those days onward, I've been a Deliveries user.
Yeah, and they switched to a subscription model about a year ago, and at the time, I'm not adverse to paying a subscription, but I thought, I don't know if I use it enough to justify it. Then I looked at the other apps out there, and I just ended up subscribing to Deliveries. I mean, it's just they just got it wired down so good.
Yeah, more and more apps are going towards subscriptions, and I know it's part of you is like, wow, I paid my good $2 for this. Why should I pay a subscription? But I actually like the idea of developers that make good apps, paying them every year to continue to improve it. I want the app to get better because it's better for me.
Yeah, I just got an email from a listener who said he didn't want to buy my field guide. He thought it cost too much money, and then he went and bought himself a $16 submarine sandwich, and he's like, oh man. I've got to go back and buy David's book now.
I'll mention a few more apps real quick before we go on.
Sure.
I mean, my favorite Twitter app is Tweetbot, and especially with all the events in the news lately, it's that's I both like it and hate it, I suppose. But I love the Tweetbot app. Scanner Pro, whenever I really try to be as digital as possible, which I'll talk about more later when we talk about the iPad. But whenever I get a piece of paper, Scanner Pro by a company called Readle is just a great app for taking a quick image and automatically saving it to my Dropbox and naming it the way that I like and stuff.
Now with Scanner Pro, one of the things I really like about their app is they have built-in workflows and automations. Do you use any of that stuff?
I have in the past, although right now I've got it set up and I forget if it's through an automation or, basically when it comes in, it names it the way that I like with, the year-month-day and puts it in the folder that I need in Dropbox. And then once it's in Dropbox, no matter where I am, I can get it where I need it. So I haven't needed to use any of the fancier parts right now for the most part, but I have tried it in the past and I like that they have that capability. But I also love it just because the quality is really good. I mean, it does a great, it's I maybe not exactly as good as a, thousands of dollars flatbed scanner that we have in my law office, but it's darn close, and it's close enough that it's more than good enough.
Yeah, a lot of people have a very thorough paperless workflow these days without one of those flatbed or document scanners. You can do it now with just an iPhone.
One that I like that is, we talked about To-Do app before. I like to use Things, but there's an app that's sort of the opposite of a To-Do app. It's more of a have-done app. It's called When Did I? There's a couple in the App Store. This one's by an Australian developer named Heidi Pilipus, Piliypas. And it's a nice way to sort of to mark that you have done something when it's something that you don't do that often, but from time to time you just sort of want to know, gosh, how long has it been since I did blank? How long has it been since I washed my car, got a haircut, did this thing, bought a new bottle of shampoo, whatever it is. And, as you start to use it over time, you can start to see trends of, I see that I'm doing this once every so-and-so. And it's, again, it's that idea that the iPhone is adjacent to my brain. It's a great little app for keeping things like that. I think it's cute. I like that.
I had never heard of this category of apps until you had told us about it in preparation for the show today. And so I started looking into this, and it's interesting to me because it's kind of like the inverse of a habit app, where a
Absolutely.
habit app tells you, it's time to brush your teeth. This app says, when was the last time you brushed your teeth? And I don't know what to think about this category.
Although they do use brush your teeth as an example. Believe me, I'm not logging when I brush. I don't need an app to tell me the last time I brushed my teeth. But things that you might do every couple of weeks or months, it's actually, or when's the last time I had my car serviced, things like that. It's nice to just have one central location to have all that stuff in there so that I don't have to go, search through my calendar if I wrote it down there or search through some emails or it's just nice to have it all in one place.
Can you also set reminders? Like if I haven't had my car serviced in 4 months, tell me?
I don't think so. And another feature that I've requested that I hope she adds is the ability to say, on average, you do this every X days or every X weeks, just to sort of, help you predict, well, it might be time to do such and such again because you tend to do it every 7 weeks. So,
well, that's a new one for me. Thanks for sharing it.
The last one I'll mention, although again, I haven't used it much during the pandemic, but when I do travel for work a lot, I love the TripIt service because as you get, when you're taking trips, as you get your hotel email reservation, you can just forward it to a specific email address and it shows up in the TripIt app or your, car rental or, airline or whatever it is. And it's nice to have one central app that will keep all of your itineraries in one place. And when you pay for the whatever the tier that I'm on, it will actually, it does a good job of giving you alerts. I mean, I've definitely had times in the past where I'm sitting at gate, 9B at the airport and my app says, you know what, they're going to move it over to gate 7. And so I will pick myself up and start to get a good seat. And then as I'm moving over, then the announcement comes on the loudspeaker telling everybody else that we're moving to gate 7. So again, right now it's been a while since I've used that app, but I look forward to the days when I can use it again.
That was an app that was on my radar to check out this year. I traveled a lot in 2019 and I was just saving everything in Apple Notes, just PDFs of tickets and that sort of thing. And it works okay if you don't travel very much, but if you do a lot, it falls down. And it's I'm going to do TripIt. And I downloaded it and I don't think I've opened it since because I haven't gone anywhere, but hopefully one day soon.
Yeah, I'm like that too. I just don't travel enough, but I know people like Jeff and Rosemary Orchard as well who are like hardcore TripIt users. And I feel like that is probably something I'm missing out on. But I'll wait until I'm actually, leaving my front door again to
Sure.
think about it.
This episode of Mac Power Users is brought to you by 1Password. We all have countless online accounts, everything from bank websites to social media and everything in between. And of course, each of those accounts needs its own unique password. And that's where 1Password comes in. You can use it to create strong, unique passwords, and the best part is you won't have to remember them. You simply unlock 1Password, which you can do in a bunch of different ways, by the way. Face ID, Touch ID, using an Apple Watch on a recent Mac model. And all of a sudden you're logging into those websites and applications securely, safely, and quickly. With 1Password for families, you can share information with the important people in your life. And with 1Password for teams, you can create different vaults for different coworkers, managing access to critical information with fine-grained control. We use this at Relay FM, and it has been spectacular. Of course, 1Password works across a wide range of browsers and devices, so I can not only log in on my Apple devices, but on my PC and my test Android phone as well. They have a great feature called Secure Notes, so you can store non-password information in 1Password. So if you're like me and you can never remember your kids' social security numbers, stick those in 1Password, and you'll be good to go next time you have some paperwork to fill out. Head on over to onepassword.com/MPU to learn more and to sign up for a free 30-day trial. When you sign up, you'll get 20% off. Once again, that's onepassword.com/MPU.
Now, Jeff, you call the website iPhone JD, but I know that it really should be also called iPhone and iPad JD because you do a lot of work on your iPad. I remember one point I was complaining about how Google Docs on iPad was a dumpster fire, and I was on a trip, and I have one of my clients, several of my clients use Google Docs for contract stuff.
Right.
And so I wanted to track changes with it. And of course, none of it works on the iPad. I only had the iPad with me on the trip. And you sent me an email, a very nice email, just kindly saying, Dave, why didn't you just use your iPad to remote into your Mac? And then you could have done all that work. And I got thinking, man, Jeff Richardson is hardcore on iPad.
I love my iPad. In fact, iPhone JD is what the site's called, but if you type into your browser iPadJD.com, it'll go there as well. We talk about the iPad quite a bit. I talk about the iPad a lot. I use the iPad Pro, the 12.9 inch, the big one. And sure. I remember when I first got that one, I was like, whoa, this is so much bigger than the standard iPad size. But very quickly, I got used to that larger size. And now when I look at the quote unquote regular size iPad, I'm like, oh, look how cute that is. But it's, as a lawyer, my practice, typically lawyers, they're, people, paper, that's what we deal with is paper. And because of my iPad, I don't deal with paper. It has replaced, every aspect and it has improved every aspect of being a lawyer for me as a result. So I love it. The main thing for me is it's sort of a replacement for, when you think of a stereotypical lawyer, you picture them holding a yellow legal pad, right? Yeah. And the iPad is my legal pad. It's the place that I jot things down, and instead of like shoving some papers into the back of the legal pad, they are scans that are there in the iPad, and it just works so well.
I want to break that down a little bit because as someone who practices law, I can tell you those yellow pads are madness. It's the road to madness. You go into these files like as a lawyer, and there's page upon page of yellow notes in there that aren't indexed, aren't searchable, written by different people. And it's crazy. But for some reason that is the workflow that they teach you coming out of law school. How have you replaced that with the iPad? Give me some details.
So I'll mention two tools first. The Apple Pencil, which is key. That's the best part of the iPad for me, or one of the best parts of the iPad is the Apple Pencil. And I especially like the second generation version because it's got that flat edge and it can magnetically stick to the top of the iPad. I love that now works with the iPad Air as of a couple of months ago, which will hopefully encourage even more folks to see the wisdom of having an Apple Pencil. But you need to have a good stylus, and the Apple Pencil is just fabulous. I will mention parenthetically that if it's too expensive for you, if you don't want to spend over $100 for a stylus, there are some good alternatives out there. For example, a company called Adonit, Adonit, makes a number of fabulous styluses. They have styli, I don't know what the word is. They have the Adonit Note line, which is good. It's, maybe $50 or even cheaper, and they work really well. They're almost as good as the Apple Pencil, not quite as responsive. And some of them even come with special features. Like I reviewed one on my website last year in the beginning of the pandemic called the, forgetting the name of it, but it's the version of the Adonit Note that has a UV light on it. So, scientists, I guess, say that you can use ultraviolet light to kill germs, including COVID. And so if you, didn't want to touch that cup before you destroyed the potential bacteria or viruses on it, you could literally use your stylus and hold down a button on it and just run the UV light over it, which is a little silly, but, who knows?
I kind of like the idea, though, of having like your own laser gun that you have.
Exactly. You do feel almost like, exactly, like you have your own lightsaber or something. They even have a model that I haven't tried yet, but it's called like their M model that you can use with an iPad as an external mouse. Like you sort of quote unquote draw on the table and it acts as a mouse input. It's, I applaud them for trying to find a way to give people a reason to look at their products over Apple's. But frankly, at the end of the day, Apple Pencils works so well for me. And then the flip side of it is you need a good app for taking notes in. And although I take notes in different forms in many different apps, my number one favorite one is GoodNotes, which just allows me to have virtual pages that for me are a light yellow background with lines on it, just like it was a traditional legal pad. And I have a different, I have one for the Smith case, one for the Jones case, one for this, one for a project, one for a pro bono thing I'm working on. Whatever it is, I have its, virtual pad, and then just have pages and pages of notes in there. And you can just take notes in handwriting. It does a pretty good job of automatically, as you're writing, using OCR to understand your handwriting. So like if I'm taking notes in a trial and I may have 100 pages of notes and I'm like, oh, where did witness such and such talk about, the part 1, 2, 3? I can just do a search for 1, 2, 3 and jump right to that page. But it's just a great place to keep everything. Most of my law practice is appellate oral arguments. And so I just had one a few days ago that I was getting ready for. And I just, used the pencil to write my oral argument. And then I wanted to quote something from like a document. And so I just take a quick, use the screen capture function to take a picture of that and then crop it down and put that right there in my notes so that when I'm reading it, I'm reading exactly from that little snippet of the contract or the document. And you can have different colors and different sizes. And as I work on my argument, something that originally was on page 1, I might move back to page 2 or page 3. And when I actually go to give my oral argument, I'm not going to read from the notes. I mean, usually at that point, I know exactly what I'm going to say. But because I'm such a visual person, I can sort of picture in my head, oh, yeah, what the judge is asking me about now, that's what I wrote in blue on I can sort of picture that corner of the second page where I had it. And I can remember exactly what I wrote that I wanted to say in response to that. So it's just fabulous. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, the process of writing it, there's science behind the process of writing versus typing and how it connects things in your brain. And that's absolutely doable with a digital tool. Although I have to laugh that you're still using yellow paper. I think that's funny. One of the things I like about GoodNotes, just to pile on a little bit, because I've looked at all of them and GoodNotes is the one I use too. They have different paper styles in addition to colors. So like I really like the dot grid because it allows you to draw, images as well as writing, and it does keep some semblance of order on the page, but when you zoom out, you don't even see the dot grid. Another thing you can do with it is you can create templates. So like if you wanted to do your daily diary handwriting on your iPad, you could do that, and you could actually create a diary sheet and save it as a template into day one, and it would do that for you. I'm sorry, day one, into GoodNotes, and it would do that for you. So you could just like write on top of it. One of the complaints a lot of people have about this, though, is they're like, I like the feeling of my pen on my paper, and, plastic on glass is not the same. How does, where do you fall on that? Do you take any steps to try and make it a better experience?
For the most part, I'm used to it, but I do agree with those folks with one part, which is that I find I can write more quickly using a nice pen on paper than I can with my stylus on a screen. And so times when time is of the essence, and a good example is, when I was giving that oral argument a few weeks ago, I went first and then my opponent went and then I had a rebuttal. While my opponent was speaking, I had to, quickly jot down what they were saying and then noted on the right how I was going to respond to it. I find that when I've tried to do that in the past on my iPad, I just find that I can't write quite as quickly. And so I definitely use paper for that. But otherwise, that's the big one for me. I know that there are people, and I've tried some of these in the past, these screen protectors that change the feel of the surface of the iPad. But at the end of the day, I guess it's a question of personal taste. But I love the way the Apple Pencil stylus feels against the iPad screen.
I would recommend, if you're interested in that, there's one that I put on as an experiment last year, and I've kept it on for the whole year. It's the Moshi Eye Visor, and it doesn't require like a clean lab to install like so many of these do. It installs very easily, and it's got a really nice feel to it, and it also kind of brings down. You don't get fingerprints anymore, and you don't get as much glare back, but and it feels really nice writing on the pen with that eye visor on it. I think you used one of those too, Stephen, or didn't you at one point use one of those?
Yeah, I did for quite a while, and it is really nice, especially if you use your iPad outdoors at all, or you can't control the light. It does amazing things to the glare.
But Jeff, I think it's interesting. We have a lot of people on to talk about iPad, and they always want to talk about keyboards, but one of the things you told me in preparation for today is that the pencil is by far the most used accessory on your iPad.
It is, because it's not just when I am taking handwritten notes. It's also when, I'm looking at documents. I mean, a big part of what I do for my work is, I will get a brief from my opponent and I'll read the brief and I'll have to come up with my arguments in response to it. And so I use the app that I'm mostly using is called PDF Expert, also by Riedel, where, I will get the PDF version of the document, and using PDF Expert and my pencil, I will go through and highlight things that I want to make sure that I respond to, write notes, in the marginalia, in the margins of, what I want to say in response. So I'm using the pencil not just for just taking traditional notes, but for annotating other documents all the time. And because the pencil's in my hand a lot, I mean, I find that I'm using it, just to sort of navigate through the screen and stuff like that. Of course, now there's the new feature that you can actually use the scribble feature to write in a field, pretty much anywhere on the iPad. And I don't use it a lot, but every once in a while, the pencil is just right there in my hand. I'm like, oh, this is nice. I'll just sort of sketch it out. And so I like it. It really is useful. I do use external keyboards some, but most of when I'm dealing with my documents, the main time I'm using an external keyboard is if I'm working with something like Microsoft Word. And then even then, if I'm working with a Word document, sometimes if I have a document somebody else sent me, instead of doing like, red line annotation, sometimes I'll just use my stylus in Microsoft Word app and draw a big circle and say, you gotta move this one down. You gotta move this one further up. And, this argument doesn't work, stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, Microsoft has been very good at adopting support for Apple Pencil in the Office suite, and
agreed.
There's a whole tool set based on using the pencil, so it's pretty great. Yeah, I'm with you, man. I think the Apple Pencil really replaces paper in so many ways. The one thing I can't get over is how these PDF apps, though, still so often kind of revert to the analog paper version of what they used to be, like the highlighter, the red line. I do like some of these apps like Liquid Text that are trying to push the envelope a little bit. Do you do any of that stuff?
I've tried Liquid Text. In fact, I tried it most recently because you had mentioned it in your paperless field guide recently. And I'm like, let me take another look at that. That requires me to sort of move my brain in a different direction. And I'm not saying I'm not going to do it one day, but it is a whole different way to work with documents. And I just sort of need to rethink how I conceive of documents, to be squeezing parts of them in and moving parts of them out. I love the idea of it, and I'm going to try it. But it's that's a unique way of looking at things.
Now, you're a big iPad guy. You like the lunch tray, and there is a rumor that I think probably has some truth behind it, that this year we're going to get a redesigned iPad mini. It's going to be a mini size, but hopefully maybe have the squared off design, or just an improved mini. I guess so. Was it Mike Hurley and Federico and a bunch of other people on Relay now are doing this double iPad thing where they get the big one and the tiny one? Do you see yourself going down that road?
I've done it in the past. When the original iPad mini came out, I was one of the first in line to get one. And there was a while when I had my regular size iPad, which of course is smaller than the 12.9 I use now, and the iPad mini. And I love that mini. I mean, it's a nice device, especially for just pure consumption. You just want to read stuff. You can hold it in your hand there. It's like a little book. I used to when I would, sometimes when I would travel and I would leave my laptop at the office and just travel with my iPads to get work done, I would actually sort of set up in the hotel room, like the mini would be on the side with like the contract on it, and the iPad would be in front of me, and I'd use Microsoft Word to type. Now, that was before the days of where you could have multitasking on the iPad and split screen and everything else. But I have to admit, I do have a soft spot for that mini just because it's cute and powerful and easy to hold and so light. I understand the allure of it.
Especially if they made it with the same design aesthetic of the iPhone and the other iPads, and Apple Pencil support. I guess they already have Apple Pencil support in it, but it's
the Apple Pencil 1. So to charge it, you got to plug it in like an animal.
Yeah. Oh, Steven, are you in line for the new iPad Mini if they make one that checks all those boxes?
Yeah. I mean, I've got an iPad Mini in addition to my 11-inch iPad Pro, and I love it for being around the house and reading, things I've saved to Instapaper, or even reading in the Kindle app. So I think it's a really nice middle size. And if this rumor's right and it gets a little bit bigger, then it separates it from the phones a little bit, because as the phones have gotten bigger, they've really started to eat into the iPad Mini's territory size-wise.
I haven't checked. What is the approximate? Is there a rumor when that would get released?
I think the most recent thing I saw was like an 8.4-inch display, and supposedly it would be in the first half of this year.
Yeah,
but
maybe we'll be talking about it before the end of before we get to summer.
Yeah, I mean, the iPad Pro that I'm using came out in 2018, and although Apple did introduce a new model in 2020, it didn't have any differences in it that made a difference for my life.
Sure.
But my hope is that the current iPad Pro is so close in features to the iPad Air that came out a few months ago. I mean, Apple must realize how close they are in features, and I can only imagine that the reason that exists is because they're about to come out with a new iPad Pro with something really cool in it, and then maybe at the same time introduce an iPad Mini that captures some of that. So my hopes are that 2021, we're going to see some great new iPad features.
Yeah, I think we all agree. I mean, the line between the Pro and the standard, the Air, I guess now is so close that they must have, like, was it micro LED? They've got some new technologies that we've been hearing about for a few years now. I would expect that the new Pro will get all that stuff.
Mm-hmm. So getting back to your use of the iPad Pro, you're doing a lot of stuff with the Apple Pencil, but what about typing and writing? Are you using a keyboard?
Sometimes, not as much as some other folks use. I mean, I don't use a keyboard enough that it would make sense for me to have a keyboard built into the case on my iPad.
Okay.
But I do use it sometimes. One of the things I really love in my office is I use a PC in my office, and the keyboard I'd been using for years just wasn't working, and I had to get something new. And so I picked up this thing by Logitech called MX Keys, which is a really nice keyboard. It doesn't have it's just sort of a flatter keyboard, so it doesn't have like the big keys if you want to go that direction. But it works well. It's incredibly comfortable. It's wireless. But my favorite feature of it is that the buttons. It's a full size keyboard with 108 keys. But there are 3 buttons at the top that you can assign to switch. But there are 3 different Bluetooth radios in it, and so I can assign it that when it's on button 1, it works with my PC. When I press button 2, it works with my iPad. And since I have a button 3, why not assign it to my iPhone too? And so I love that at my desk, most of the time, this Logitech keyboard is working on the PC, and I'm typing my, boring PC documents, whatever. But then if I want to turn to my iPad, which is just there to the left, I just press a button, and almost instantly, I'm typing on my iPad with that same keyboard. and it works so great. And then I go back to the computer and I hit a button again. So I love that keyboard. The other one that I use is the Magic Keyboard. And don't get too excited. Nowadays, when people say Magic Keyboard, they think of the fancy, expensive one that Apple came up with last year. But years and years ago, and Apple still sells it, was the small little Magic Keyboard, not Magic Keyboard for iPad. It's just a regular old Bluetooth keyboard. And I use it wrapped in one of these cases by Studio Neat called the Canopy to sort of protect the keys and keep it wrapped up, and it folds into a stand. And so when I travel, that's the keyboard that I travel with to just stick it in my bag, and I can unfold it and put my iPad in it, and then I'm typing when I need to do that, but then I fold it up and put it away. And so I may go days without using a keyboard, but when I want one, there usually is one available, but I don't use it nearly as much as I use the stylus.
I just want to second the nomination for a keyboard with multiple Bluetooth radios. I got religion on this last year with the Logitech Craft keyboard, and I can't see myself ever going back. I mean, the ability to push a button and switch from Mac to iPhone to iPad is, you just don't understand how much you would use it until you have it on your desk.
Yeah. Now, I am a little jealous of the fancy Apple Magic Keyboard that has the built-in trackpad, because I can see how a trackpad would be great with an iPad with multi-touch and stuff. I mean, I'm just using a regular Apple Magic Mouse too, which is great. It's fine. It's an extra mouse, but that's the one thing that I do. If I was a serious keyboard user, then I could easily talk myself into having the one with the trackpad built in. But because I don't use it as much, it's fine.
Do you have any other accessories that you recommend for the iPad?
Well, one of the nice things I like about the iPad Pro is that it has USB-C, which opens you up to all sorts of different things, including, I mean, you can find on Amazon millions of little USB-C hubs. The one that I'm carrying around is made by Hyperdrive. It's their 6-in-1, and you can just plug this thing. It's made for the iPad Pro, so it sits flat against the side of it, and it gives you every port you could really want. HDMI out if you're giving a presentation, or if you want to plug in old style headphones, you can do that. An SD card slot, pass through USB-C to get power. I feel like it's sort of a jack of all trades. Anything you need, I just I have it right there. I plug it on there, and my iPad can do anything. And then when I don't need it, take it away, and nothing extra to the side of it. That one's really useful.
Another cool thing you were telling me about is your pandemic project that is iPad focused.
Yeah, I mean, I was stuck at home, as we all were, and had to do something. So I decided it was a good chance to go through all of the old photographs that I have, some of which were on negatives and some of which were, just literally a photograph, and get them all scanned in. And then, of course, when you first scan them, the quality looks pretty poor. But the iPad is just such a fantastic tool for improving your pictures. You can use the pencil to use touch up on it and stuff like that. And you can the screen is so beautiful, but it's so portable that I could just sit there on the couch or in the back porch or wherever I want to do, and I could work on the photos that I had scanned in. And so I'll just throw out real quick some recommendations for some apps that I found really useful. One was an app called Pixelmator Photo, which is great for touching up a photo with the pencil in case you have like little dust and things like that, particles. You can very quickly pick them up. That's so much easier with a pencil than on a computer using a mouse, and adjusting color and stuff. Adobe Lightroom, of course, is incredibly powerful, and it's got some great filters on it, like de-hazing and complicated vignette filters. I love the power that you can do all those cool things on an iPad. And another useful one is called Metapho, Metapho, which is nice because it makes it super easy to adjust the date and the location of pictures. So when I scan stuff in, of course, it has today's date on it, even though the picture itself is 25 years old. So I can go put an approximate right date on it so it shows up in the right place in photos.
And that's a real common problem for people trying to add old photos to their photos library. It's like that's the scan date that goes in. It's not the actual date of the photo. And you've got a picture from the 70s there. You need an easy way. I wasn't aware of this app, and I checked it out in preparation for today's show. It's a nice app. I was always doing this only on the Mac because I hadn't found a tool like this. But Metapho is one I'd recommend.
Yeah, I know it works great. The last one I found useful over the last couple of months was Photoshop Express. Adobe has so many Photoshop adjacent apps. But frankly, the only reason I found myself using it is it has a really good red eye tool in it. Apple has a red eye tool in photos, but it doesn't show up very often. I mean, you have to have a pretty obvious big face with a big red eye on it for it to even show up. I don't understand it. But until Apple gets their act together on the iPad from Red Eye, the Photoshop Express app does a pretty good job on that.
Jeff, what is the because I know you use the iPad for a lot of stuff. Are there any roadblocks for you? Are there things that you want to do on your iPad that just aren't possible?
The big one for me is this is probably screen size. Even though the 12.9-inch screen is big, it's still, for sometimes when I want to get work done, I find myself going to the computer just because I have the larger screen. And you can have, yes, you can have side-by-side documents on the iPad. And believe me, I do that quite a bit. I will have, the document I'm looking at on the left, and I'll have, a Word or Notepad or something on the right as I'm taking notes. But sometimes when I need just more space, that's when I go to the computer. But aside from that, I mean, I really can get so much done on the iPad, and especially during the pandemic, I could do the computer, but sometimes it was just nice, when you're sort of on top of your family and stuff, just to find your one little corner of the house. And I found I could get 90% of what I needed to get done on the iPad, and it was great.
Yeah, that's a great story, because I do think for a lot of us, it's like you do hit stumbling blocks with the iPad sometimes, and you've managed your workflows in a way where you really haven't. What if Apple made a 15-inch iPad, or what if they made my dream machine, the iMac, that tilts down to a 27-inch iPad? Would that be something you're interested in?
I would cheer it on, but I would probably never use it. I mean, it'd be too big to carry around. I see, this podcaster, Leo Laporte, who on a Twit, he's got one of those big Microsoft, they call it the Surface, whatever those things are that, basically bigger than a lunch tray. And that's cool. I mean, I've actually seen one of those in a Microsoft store before, back when they used to have Microsoft stores. But I mean, practically, I don't, I'm not an architect that needs a CAD table or something like that. I just think that there are some things that the computer is best for. And, but there's a lot of things that you don't need a computer for that the iPad is just as good for. And there are some things that the iPhone's good enough, and some things that the Apple Watch is good enough. Everything has a purpose for it. So
do you just work on your iPad, or do you play too on it?
I'm not a big game person, but I tend to always have like my one guilty pleasure. And the one that I've been using a lot lately is an app called Good Sudoku by Jack. I'm forgetting the name of the developer. I forget, but it's a great app. As the name tells you, it's good. But what I love about it is not only can you play Sudoku, but it's the first app I've ever seen that changes the dynamics of the game in a way to speed it up, and it even teaches you how to be a better player, which I didn't expect. And so whenever I have like a little downtime, I'll pick up my iPad and do some Sudoku puzzles. I like that. Sometimes I do crosswords on my iPad too.
Yeah, Jack Schlesinger and Zach Gage.
Zach Gage, that's the name I was thinking of, yeah.
Zach Gage, anything he makes, for me, is an insta-buy. Mm-hmm. He gets it, and he makes these mobile games that are fun. And he'll take a traditional guy. He did one with chess, too, a few years ago, if memory serves. And that guy is, I am always curious what he's going to do next. But that's a great app.
Yeah, I thought I was going to lose my job by playing flip-flop solitaire too much. I finally had to
Oh, that's a great one, too.
throw my phone in the river to get rid of it.
This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by HelloFresh. Start cooking some delicious meals today. Click the link and use the code MPU10 for 10 free meals, including free shipping. With HelloFresh, you get free pre-measured ingredients and mouth-watering seasonal recipes delivered right to your door. HelloFresh lets you skip those trips to the grocery store and makes home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. And that's why it's America's #1 meal kit. Every week, HelloFresh offers more than 23 recipes to choose from, featuring a range of flavors, cuisines, and ingredients, so you'll never get bored. One of the things I love about HelloFresh is they give you exactly what you need. You don't have to go to the grocery store, you don't have a big grocery bill, and you don't have a bunch of food waste. HelloFresh delivers pre-portioned ingredients, so you're not overbuying, which is the burden on the planet and your wallet. They offer the flexibility you need with customizable orders every week. You can easily change your delivery days or food preferences and skip a week whenever you need. I've been a HelloFresh subscriber for quite a while now. I like cooking dinner for my family, and I had never really done it before I left the firm and started working from home. The problem was I was cooking the same things all the time. With the HelloFresh subscription, suddenly I had all these different options available to me with cuisines I'd never even attempted before. So they send me the box of food. It's really easy to follow the instructions. Even a bozo like me can make a delicious dinner for my family, and my wife really appreciates it. It's cheaper than going for takeout, and it's healthier. Best of all, it's my podcast time. I can stick a podcast in my ear and cook a meal for my family. My favorite HelloFresh recipes are the ones that are unusual or maybe some ethnic food that I've never cooked before. It's really fun taking on the challenge, and it's really not that difficult because they just lay it out for you. The Thai spiced pork meatballs is a big hit in my family, as well as the sesame beef tacos. The thing I can't get over with HelloFresh is that you don't have to have any cooking ability to make a really good meal for your family. So go sign up for HelloFresh yourself, put on a good podcast or an audiobook, and make something delicious for your family. If you go to hellofresh.com/MPU and use the code MPU10, you get 10 free meals, including free shipping. Try HelloFresh today, which is America's #1 meal kit. Go to hellofresh.com/MPU. Use code MPU10 for 10 free meals, including shipping, and let them know you heard about it here on the Mac Power Users. Our thanks to HelloFresh for the support of the Mac Power Users and all of Relay FM.
So, Jeff, we've spoken a lot about your use of the 12.9-inch iPad Pro, but of course you are also working on more traditional computers, a PC and a Mac. So I want to know what's sitting, on your desk in the office and how you deal with all this information between these different platforms.
Sure. So I have in my office, in my law firm, we're all PC. We actually used to use Macs back in the 1990s, but switched over to PCs in the early 2000s because all of the law-specific vertical software was really just for PC at the time, which has changed a bit now. But so I just have a Dell laptop with an external monitor. And at home, I have a 27-inch iMac, which I love. And in fact, I love it so much. I have the version that came out in 2018. I presume that Apple is going to come out with an M1 iMac this year. And even though this iMac is perfectly fine, it's going to be tough to resist it when they have an M1 version. But so I'm constantly working between when I'm in my office using the PC, when I'm at home using the iMac.
Do you use the iMac? Do you dual boot into Windows, or is it just running Mac OS?
No, I've tried that a long time ago and found that it wasn't really necessary because for me, if I'm going to be in a Windows environment, what I actually want to see is my personal actual Windows environment. So I prefer to use remote access software so that I can, take on my iMac screen. I can just show whatever my computer is doing in my office, even if I'm, sitting across town here at home, as I'm actually recording from home today. So if I want to get some work done, I just use the app that I use is called Log Me In. And I know there's other remote access apps too, but in just a couple keystrokes, once I authenticate myself, whatever screen is on the PC that's on and running in my office, I see it right here at home. In fact, it's even better because the display on this 27-inch iMac is far nicer than the Dell monitor that I have in my office. So it's even better in some ways. And because I have a fast internet connection, it basically just looks like my PC. If you walked in here, you would just see, start menus and boring PC icons and everything else. But that way, things that are on my desktop or things that are in special locations, I can just get that work done within the sort of PC environment. We have things like our document management system and other, law-specific, corporate type, client management, all these sorts of corporate apps that are just within Windows. And that's fine because I just connect to the computer using my Mac and get all my work done. But then sometimes, I can also, use the other apps too, because there's, nowadays between software being dual platform and things being browser based, it's easy to get things done. I mean, I'm a lawyer. I work with documents, and so Microsoft Word is a big part of my bread and butter. And Word works great on the PC. It works great on the Mac. It works great on the iPad. Works great everywhere. In the pandemic, we've been using Microsoft Teams a lot to, instead of going to get together in a conference room and talk to a team about a project, we have these video chats using Microsoft Teams. And, you could do the same thing with Zoom, of course. And that's all cross-platform. So it works wherever you are. 1Password, Text Expander, whatever apps that I would be using on my PC, I have on my Mac. And it makes it pretty easy to go back and forth, really.
The explosion of web apps and web technology makes the old battles of Microsoft versus Apple kind of silly because it doesn't matter which platform you're on now. So much of the stuff you do is web based anyway. But the idea of this log me in, you know, basically tunneling into your work computer to have Windows on your Mac is one I think a lot of people dismiss because they feel like it'd be too rickety or, like the connection would be too slow. I think there's a lot of people that would think about it but haven't tried it. Share some of your experience with that. Where are the problems and what are the best practices?
Well, first of all, you need to make sure that your computer in your office is on. I mean, if you turn off your computer, you can't connect. Now, if that was to happen, I actually have a workaround because our office also has, it uses Citrix, which is sort of a virtual Windows environment. So I could, from any computer, including my Mac, connect to a Citrix environment for my law firm. And although it wouldn't be my specific desk with, my specific documents on my desktop where they are, it would be a generic environment that would have all of the applications I would need, everything that's on our document management system. I can get that done. But to tell you the truth, I use Citrix maybe, once every 3 months, once every 6 months. It's so rare that the log me in remote access to my own computer doesn't work because I always have that computer on, whether I'm in the office or not. And when I say on, of course, it's locked and everything. Nobody can, walk up in my office and start, if they had access, nobody could use it. But once I log in and it knows that it's me and I authenticate myself, it's not 100% the same speed as sitting in my office, but it's pretty close. And and like I said, it's a nicer screen. I have fast gigabit Ethernet or internet rather at my home. And so I have a fast connection. And of course, my office has a fast connection. So, I'm not saying that you'd want to do this with dial-up, but for most people, whether you're using a good Wi-Fi connection, or my iMac is actually directly connected using Ethernet, the internet is not really a bottleneck for me. And, the keyboard works, the mouse works, everything just works.
Yeah, back when I worked in a firm, I did the same thing. And I would even write word processing documents and, open Word on my office computer. Not always, because I could also do it on my Mac, but occasionally there would be some reason for me to do typing and input on that computer from a remote access and a computer that's 20 miles away from me. And it worked fine. And that was 5 years ago. So I'm sure it's only better now.
In fact, I'll give you another example, David. Log Me In is not, and many of these apps are not just on a Mac. They also work on an iPhone or an iPad. And so I have absolutely had times where I am in a hotel room somewhere because I'm taking a deposition, across the country somewhere. And I don't even take my computer with me. I just take my iPad and a keyboard, and I will set up my iPad in the little case with the keyboard in front of it so it looks like it's a laptop computer. And I will use Log Me In on my iPad, and then suddenly my work computer is right there on my iPad, and it's connected to all the fast network stuff because it's literally in my office. I'm just sort of seeing the screen remotely. And, the iPad screen at 12.9 inches is, a little bit on the smaller side for a laptop, but it works to get things done. And it's much better nowadays that you can use an external mouse and an external keyboard and everything else. And that works. And I've even had times when I've used my iPhone. I've been sitting in an airport and I forgot about a document on my desktop. And, looking at your computer screen on a small iPhone screen is not ideal. You're not going to write the next great American novel that way, but it works. It works in a pinch, and you can grab a document and, navigate the little screen to email it to somebody, or it's great that you can work from wherever you are to just get the stuff done.
Yeah, that's what in my mind makes you an iPad Jedi, is that you travel routinely with just an iPad, and you're a lawyer that does a lot of heavy duty document work. And, that ability to tunnel into your work computer, no matter where you are, I'm sure is essential for that. But it still is quite a trick, to be able to go on the road and feel totally comfortable not bringing an actual Mac or a PC laptop.
Yeah. Apple deserves a lot of credit for that, though, because they, I think back to when the original iPhone came out in 2007, it was so limited, didn't have third-party apps. But the big one for me is that it didn't have access to Microsoft Exchange, which is, so much of companies in this country around the world, rely upon Microsoft Exchange. But now, it works well. So I can just use the Mail app on my iPad to get access to all my law firm email. And of course, I've got all sorts of security nonsense that we have on here to make that secure. But it works great. And likewise, I don't actually use the native Mail app on my Mac to work with Exchange. I think that actually it would work, but it doesn't work in my experience. The last time I tried it as seamlessly as my iPad does. But even so, you can use things like just a browser based. I can get into our firm email through a browser using the Outlook web access. And, we've got super good security with two-factor that, I can't even log in unless I put not only my name and not only my password, but also use a authenticator app on my phone to confirm that I am really me and I'm not somebody just pretending to be Jeff Richardson in some other part of the world. But once you get past that, then you're in, and then you can just, deal with your emails and get work done, and it works great. And I think that's going to be even more in the future. I mean, I saw an article, I don't know if this is true, that Microsoft is thinking about, or they're going to be moving even away from Outlook as a client software and move it all towards web-based. And I mean, web-based stuff is so sophisticated. I just think that, especially for professional use, like what I do in a law practice, I think more and more software is going there. And then it doesn't matter what you're using. I mean, you could use a Mac, you could use a PC, you could use whatever you want. Take out your old, TRS-80 or whatever. Take, whatever you can get on there. It's,
If you can check Exchange with a TRS-80, you're getting a
you may not
trophy.
literally be able to do that, but
Yeah. I mean, I've seen that. My wife's a teacher, and they use Microsoft products, and so she has an Exchange email account. She does the same thing you do on her phone and in the browser on the Mac. And I mean, it's really amazing how the iPhone and iPad in particular are really pretty agnostic towards different online, repositories of data, whether it be through mail or syncing contacts and calendars, or even things like Dropbox or Box plugging into the Files app. I feel like Apple's done a good job at making their devices play really well with others.
And honestly, you have to hand it to Microsoft. I realize they're a sponsor today, and this is totally, not why I'm saying this, but they have really leaned into the Apple platforms and making their stuff just work. I can't get over what a good job they've done with Word on the iPad. I'm sure, Jeff, that's one of the reasons why you can travel with just an iPad.
Oh, it's fantastic. I mean, one of the more complicated things that attorneys, and I'm sure others do, is, red line edits, where someone sends you a draft of a document and you want to edit it, but you would need to make it clear what your edits are, and someone else has edits on top of that. And it works great. I mean, there's still a few things that Word on the iPad doesn't do as well as the computer, like styles, but they're really at the edge, and Microsoft actively develops it. And Microsoft may be a sponsor for y'all today, but they're not paying me anything. And I could not be more impressed at how easy they make it is to get your work done using the Microsoft software on whatever platform you want. It doesn't have to be PC.
Yeah, the way I get around that styles problem. So if you're listening and use Microsoft Word on iPad, they don't let you adjust style formatting, which is something that I like to do. I like to be very particular about styles. But I've just saved a bunch of style templates, and then I build documents off of those templates. And since they're already built, I don't have to adjust them on iPad. That's my little.
And what you can do is you can take a paragraph that has the style you want, copy the paragraph, go to a second paragraph, and when you paste, instead of pasting the paragraph, so you're replacing the content, there's a paste format option on the iPad, which will apply that, or paste style rather, which will apply that style. So you can work around it, but nevertheless, even though there's workarounds, it's not as seamless as it is on the computer.
Spoken like a guy who travels with an iPad.
This episode of Mac Power Users is brought to you by Behind the Tech with Kevin Scott, a podcast about tech heroes who have made our modern world possible. Finding new podcasts is great, and I love finding ones that teach me about things I didn't know. And this show with Kevin Scott definitely falls into that category. Guest interviews from tech innovators, entrepreneurs, pioneers, and innovators are featured on every episode. Topics range from AI and machine learning to synthetic biology, neuroscience, data, space, predictions about the future, and more. The show has featured an incredible number of guests, including Dr. Mae Jemison, an astronaut, Tom Daniel, neuroscientist and bioengineer, and Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn. He's also an entrepreneur, author, and venture capitalist. So a wide range of really interesting interviews on this show. So go and listen to it now. Just search for Behind the Tech with Kevin Scott wherever you get your podcast. That's Behind the Tech, or click the link in the show notes to check it out. Our thanks to Behind the Tech and Microsoft for their support of this show and Relay FM.
Jeff, I also know you're a home automation guy. You're
I do.
drinking from the forbidden fruit of HomeKit.
HomeKit it needs improvement. Apple, it could do so much more, but I do love what it does. I use it a lot. One of the most useful ones I have are by a company called Lutron. They have their Cassetta devices, and they have like a Cassetta wireless dimmer, which you just take the dimmer that would be on your wall that would control your lights, that turn the lights on or off or dim them up and down, and you replace it and you install this device instead. And what I love about it is, most importantly, it is still a dimmer on your wall that with buttons on it that someone could go and touch. So it's got, the old, spousal approval factor that, no one's going to lose their ability to use the light. It's not like one of these Philips Hue thing that you always have to have the light switch in the up position and then control the lights elsewhere. So I love that. But then it gives you the ability to control lights from anywhere. So when I started at my house, I started with a couple of the wireless dimmers and some of their lamp dimmers that just plug into an outlet and you plug a lamp into it. And then using your iPhone or other devices, you can control lights, and it's easy just to tap to have lights come on, tap to have lights go off. And I started with a few, and then over time sort of expanded out to other things. Like I have an outdoor one, which is made by a company called iHome. It's called their ISP 100, and it's an outdoor. It's safe for getting wet and things like that if it's outdoors. And you plug in some things in it. So like at my house, I have lights in our backyard, like Christmas sort of lights, sort of strung up in the backyard just to make things look a little bit nicer back there. And I love that I can just tap a button and get all that stuff to turn on. In fact, I even have one. We have a garage in the back. And I had a Lutron installed in there so that if it's like dark at night, as I'm walking outside to go to the garage, I can get the light on before I even get to the garage to pull whatever, things I want out of there. And then by the time I'm back in the house, I can turn it off. And all that stuff works really well, and I love it. And I like that you can use the app, the home app, to do it, or the specific app for the manufacturer like Lutron. Or you could use Siri, you can say, hey, who, turn on the garage light and it will come on. Or recently during the holidays, hey, who, turn on the Christmas lights, and it would turn on the lights on my tree, and it would turn on some other Christmas lights we had hanging over the door to make everything look more festive, and worked great. And I also have an app called Home Run on my Apple Watch that it lets you sort of design little panels on it that you can put different colored icons on it. So like I have one, in fact, I haven't taken it off yet, even though Christmas is over, but I'm looking at my watch right now and I have a little icon of a Christmas tree in the bottom right. And if I tap that, it would turn on all the Christmas related lights. So I like it because it's fun and it makes the home seem a lot more smart. And my wife sometimes uses them as well. But especially when you use the Lutron devices, everybody else can, if they just want to go press the buttons, that works fine too.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked about this on the show in the past, but having an automation system where it doesn't require your spouse to pull her phone out of her pocket to turn the lights on has 100% improved chance of adoption and keeping you out of the doghouse.
Yeah.
Those Lutron things, though, once you buy one, you're going to buy more. That's another thing. It's like an M1 Mac. Don't pick one up unless you're willing to go down the rabbit hole fully. It took me like a year, but I was buying like one a month. And then before I knew it, the whole house basically has Lutron in it now.
My wife gave me a Lutron lamp dimmer for Christmas as one of my presents. I'm saying, like, I don't even know what you're going to do with it, but I'm sure you'll find something to do with it. So proof that she knows me.
You married well. That's all I'm going to say.
I did indeed. No question about that.
She gets it.
Have y'all been doing anything that does automation with HomeKit, or are you just doing the simple stuff that I was just talking about? Like, do y'all have lights coming on automatically and stuff?
Yeah, I've got a few automations going. I have some lights that come on and go off at certain times across the front of the house, so it looks like someone's home. Or if we are home, it's just as it's getting dark, the lamps come on. But I also use something called the Starling Home Hub. You can do this with HomeBridge as well. That puts your Nest equipment into HomeKit. It acts as sort of a translator. And so I have a couple of scenes where I can turn the camera on and set the Nest alarm in my office, or disarm it, turn certain lights on and off. And so setting those scenes, being able to control them, or letting automation control them with time, it's It's fantastic. A lot of the pieces of HomeKit are simple, but if you spend some time, especially if you use apps like Home Run, which is really cool, you can really make this stuff sing.
Yeah, I don't even want to open the Pandora's box of my home automation right now. I do want to ask you, Stephen, though, that device that allows you to use your Nest cams, does that also allow you to use them as HomeKit secure video cameras?
No, because the Nest stuff is tied to their service, but it does put the cameras in the Home app, so I can view them in the Home application if I want to, but it won't save the stream. That still goes to Nest.
Yeah, over the holidays, I was seeing deals on those Eufy cameras that can be used for HomeKit secure video. They were like $30. I mean, I couldn't believe how cheap they were over the holidays. So that's going to be a good story this next year. I think all that stuff is going to get a lot easier.
I haven't tried the cameras yet. We don't have any in our house, but I do the same thing as you, Stephen, where we have lights in the front of our house. In fact, we have for the architecture folks on the call, we have on the podcast, listening to the podcast, we have a Greek revival style house, which means there's an upstairs balcony and a downstairs one, but they're on completely different light switches, of course. But I have it automated that they will come on at the same time, right around sunset, and then go off a certain number of hours before sunrise. And that's nice that they can just come on automatically. And it's also, nice that they, even if we're not here, in the days when we'll travel again, have the lights come on automatically. And the other automatic thing I have is I've been using this thing called the Elgato Eve Motion, and we have it set up in our the room that we have our big TV in, and it's just a motion detector. And so if someone walks in, the lights just sort of come on automatically for you, which is sort of fancy and fun. And you have to tweak that to make it work correctly, because what you don't want to have is someone's back there watching TV with the lights turned off, and then someone walks in and suddenly the lights come on full blare and you're blind. But I have it set up that it will only come on if it's been 3 hours since it last changed. You have to do a little scripting on that to make it work. But once you get it set, it's nice just to be able to walk in a room and have the lights come on automatically. You feel like you're in some fancy living in the Jetsons or something.
Yeah, I think there's a curve for automation where it gets progressively more difficult exponentially based on the number of people in the home. This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by Indeed. Go to Indeed.com/MPU to get a free $75 credit to upgrade your job post. Hiring is one of those things you do not want to mess up. You need to hire great people if you want to take your entire business to the next level. And with the stakes this high, there is only one choice, Indeed. Now let me tell you why. Indeed.com is the hiring site that helps you find quality candidates with Indeed's Instant Match. Indeed searches through millions of resumes in their database to help show you great candidates instantly, so you can do the part you really need faster, meeting and hiring great people. Unlike some hiring sites, Indeed gives you full control and payment flexibility, delivering a quality shortlist faster. With Indeed, there are no long-term contracts. You can pause your account at any time, and you only pay for what you need. With Instant Match, you see a list of great candidates right away. And Indeed delivers 4 times more hires than all other job sites combined, according to Talent Nest. If you want your quality shortlist fast, you need Indeed. And right now, listeners of the Mac Power Users get a free $75 credit to upgrade their job post at Indeed.com/MPU. This is Indeed's best offer available anywhere. So get a free $75 credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/MPU. One last time, that's Indeed.com/MPU. Offer is valid through March 31 and terms and conditions apply. Our thanks to Indeed for their support of the Mac Power Users and all of Relay FM. Jeff, every time we have a guest like you on, there's always a couple cool apps or services that you're using, and we want to hear about them. Tell us some other stuff you're doing with your Apple tech.
Sure. One of the ones that Apple just came out with last month is their new Fitness Plus service. And I really like it. I've been using it quite a bit. I subscribe to the Apple One Premier service, which gives you a whole bunch of the Apple stuff automatically. So in my mind, I was going to get Fitness Plus for free. So I figured, I got it without paying anything extra. I might as well use it. But I found it to be really, really useful. I have a treadmill in my house, and believe me, I'm the opposite of an Iron Man or any fitness person. But now that Apple's made it so easy and sort of fun with the Fitness Plus app, I find myself, using it almost every day. And so whether I use the treadmill workouts with my iPad propped up there as my screen, or some of the strength workouts that I'll watch on the on my Apple TV and our big TV room, just sort of move the furniture and stuff to the side so you've got some space to walk around in there, and they're very nicely done. Because I'm a technology geek, I love that it works with my Apple Watch and it'll show me right there on the screen what my actual heart rate is, how much time I have left. I love that when you get to an intense part of the workout, you're going to be doing this, really high setting for 45 seconds. It puts up like a separate little countdown timer for that. I just think it's really well done. And I know that there are other services out there like Peloton and stuff that people have loved. And I'm sure those are great too. But this one just, it works. It's so professionally done. I mean, gosh, one thing we all learned last year when Apple did its keynote presentations during the pandemic in 2020 is that Apple knows how to produce a very good looking video. And these workout videos, they look great. The people that they've hired as the trainers are just really good. And it's great how it works with your Apple Watch. So it makes it feel very personal. I just think that they're great. And it's encouraged me to be a lot more active than I would have been otherwise, which I guess is the whole point. So it's been great.
Stephen, we haven't had a chance to talk about this on the show. Have you played with the Fitness Plus service yet?
I have not yet, just because I'm still in the walking boot after my foot surgery in October. But
oh, that's right.
But
yeah.
my wife has been using it. I think for her it's a little too basic in places. She was already doing sort of the online class thing for a long time before this, so I think she likes the Apple Watch integration, but I think the content isn't quite what she was hoping for. But I am looking forward to trying it. Hopefully here pretty soon, and I'll definitely report back.
Yeah, I guess I'm like more at Jeff's level. If you saw me, you'd probably agree. That I'm not a super fit guy, but I try. Before the pandemic, I was a member at Orange Theory, and I would go in there and get my butt kicked 3 or 4 times a week. But I kind of like the tone of the coaching. I don't know how else to put it. I am not somebody who responds well to someone yelling at me, whereas it just doesn't work for me. It never has, and the older I get, the worse it is. But the way they coach in these things is actually very kind of positive, I guess, for lack of a better term. So I've been using it regularly. My only complaint about it, which I think is probably just it's because it's a version 1 service, is my wife and I want to do it together, and there's no way to put both of our devices on the screen at once.
Apple's so bad at people who have families.
Yeah. Come on,
Come
man.
on. You'll probably also have photos you want to share, but you can't do that easily either.
What is this craziness you're talking about? But so the workaround is for, one of us to be the official person on screen and one of us just to run the workout on our watch, and it's fine. But it's not, I feel like that's an easy box to check.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a 1.0 product. I mean, I'm sure they'll get better in the future, but hopefully so. Hopefully it won't stay like this. And, even if I'm sure there's more sophisticated things out there, like you said, Stephen, that your wife is using. But, maybe this is like, you start with the Reminders app and then you move up to something more sophisticated from there.
Sure.
Maybe the Apple is just the beginning and I will probably always be in the beginning to moderate level of working out. So for me, it's going to be great. And I also like the privacy of it that, there are things on here like a dance workout and yoga that I would be way too self-conscious to do that, in a room with a bunch of other people in there. But I'll try it if nobody else can see me and see how I do in my own home. So that was nice too. Yeah.
Yeah, the other thing about Orange Theory was like it was like a wall of shame. I mean, your data was on a screen with everybody else in the class, whereas here you're home and you're doing it. Another thing, Jeff, that you write about occasionally over at iPhone JD, which gets remarkably little coverage on the internet, but I think is something people should be aware of, is CarPlay.
Oh, I love CarPlay.
Yeah, you were an early adopter of CarPlay with whatever car you had. It had the service in it, but you are frequently dropping little tips for people that use CarPlay. What are a couple tips you would share today with folks that have CarPlay and aren't getting the most out of it?
Here's one tip. Use the Maps feature on it. Whether it's the Apple Maps or, I mean, of course, you can use Google Maps and Waze and third-party services as well. But you may know as you were driving to the grocery store or someplace else. Of course, you know how to get there. You don't need the maps to tell you. But when you put a route in there and you tell Apple where you're going, it will give you like alerts along the way. Like if there's a traffic issue, it will actually alert you. If there's traffic cameras, it will show you that coming up so you don't get a ticket. Not that we're speeding anyway, but sometimes it's nice to know that they're coming up. And it makes it easy because CarPlay is smart enough that, or at least tries to be smart enough, that when you get in the car, when you go in, when you tap on the Maps app, it will often suggest, I know where you go at 6 o'clock every day. You're probably headed home, aren't you? And so it will suggest the destination. You can just tap one button to do it. But then you get that advice. So even if you don't think about normally using it, I encourage you to use the Maps app. The other one, I mean, for listening to podcast, if anyone uses CarPlay that's listening to this podcast and isn't using the Overcast app, the Overcast app on CarPlay works really well. And I use it all the time for listening to podcasts. It works great. And I also love how CarPlay you can use Siri to read you stuff while you're driving. I mean, not that you want to be distracted, but sometimes I'll have something really important going on at work and I'm driving someplace or driving to a deposition and I will just ask, who to read me my new emails. And it really just gives you who it's from. And it's not going to read much of it, but it's going to give enough between the subject line and the sender to give me a sense of, is there something really important there that I need to know about right now? Or is things fine? And of course, if people text you, it can read you that and stuff too. So I just find it's just makes my car so much more powerful. I would never even consider buying a car that didn't have CarPlay in it.
I feel the same way. I mean, I retrofitted a third-party head unit into my truck so I could have CarPlay, and I bought my wife a new van last year, and now 2 years ago, and it came with CarPlay. I definitely don't want to drive without it. I think one thing I would share with people is CarPlay supports a lot more third-party apps than it did in the beginning. If you go to Apple's website, and there'll be a link in the show notes, you can see all the different Maps apps and podcast apps and music apps, all these different things that now work with CarPlay. Apple has very tight control over that, so Twitter is not going to be able to build a CarPlay app because you have to have special permission from Apple, and they're really limiting the categories that these apps are in. But chances are, if you're using a podcast client or a Maps client or something, that it's probably supported by CarPlay if it's popular enough. So you're not stuck to the Apple ecosystem, where that was definitely a lot more true when CarPlay launched, 4 or 5 years ago.
And one last tip I would add is go into the settings in your iPhone for CarPlay, and you can adjust the home screen. My wife, the reason I say this, my wife likes the Waze app. Mm-hmm. And I was driving with her and she would swipe to the right to get to the Waze app. I'm like, how come you put that on the second page? She didn't realize that she could have moved it to the first page. So every time she wanted to go somewhere, she was doing this swipe over to get to the Waze app. And that's silly. Put the apps you use the most often on the first page of the CarPlay app. And I just think a lot of people don't even realize that setting is there.
That's a really good suggestion because it is hidden. I mean, you have to go into the settings on your iPhone to find it in there, but that makes it so much better.
Yeah, and that means that your settings follow your phone. So if I get in my wife's van and her phone is plugged in, it shows what she wants on CarPlay. And then I plug my phone in, it shows what I want because we have things in different places maybe. Yeah, that's a great feature because, there's apps on my phone. Like I have every podcast client you've ever heard of on my phone because of my job. Well, I only listen to podcasts in one of those. And so having the ability to hide those other ones is really great.
I feel like we can't move off CarPlay without me just mentioning briefly a very strange text thread I had with Steven this week. Steven sent me a picture this week of he installed something on his truck that now gives it the power of the sun.
That's right.
Steven, what did you do to your truck?
Yeah, I put a big light bar on the front of it because I'm more redneck than the internet thinks I am. And sometimes I'm out in the country and need more light. So I did some wiring this weekend.
Very bright, man.
It is ridiculous. You can't look at it directly. Not for driving on the street with. I'll just leave it at that.
Now we need to figure out a way to add some shortcut automation for that.
Well, it has this physical switch. So, there was for a while on Amazon, maybe it's still there, this little like button pusher that you could address with HomeKit, I think. So there's probably
Yeah.
a way.
Yeah, why not?
But before we move off from CarPlay, one thing that I think about when I think of CarPlay is, I love my iPad so much, but the one of the limitations I mentioned earlier was sometimes you need more screen space. In theory, I think it'd be really cool if you could hook an iPad up to an external display, which you can do now, and it will mirror the image or it will, display one thing, but actually have like some apps running on the external display and different apps working on the iPad screen. And, Apple certainly could do that. But they haven't done it yet. And proof that they could do it is CarPlay, right? Because when you're using CarPlay, your iPhone is controlling the whole show. The screen in your car is just really sort of a dumb screen. Your iPhone's controlling everything. So you have apps running on the CarPlay screen at the same time that you could be using separate apps on the iPhone. So it just reminds me that Apple has this ability. I wish they would bring it to the iPad.
Yeah, I mean, just external support. Right now, all it does is mirror. And like there are some really nice third party. You were talking about screen space being your big hang up with the iPad. On Amazon, they sell like 15-inch foldable screens, LED screens that you could pack with you on a trip. And the only problem is the iPad OS doesn't drive it that way. So like you could ideally you could like send your contract in your PDF editor to the external screen and have Word open on your main iPad screen, something like that.
Right.
And that is definitely, I feel like, low-hanging fruit for them. That one seems like it's an obvious one they should get support for. And don't write in. I know that there are some apps that can separately address, like MindNote is the one everybody always talks about, where you can like kind of present from MindNote onto an external display, but that is almost never used, and it really isn't multi-screen support. It's like single app multi-screen support that is rarely used. It's
and
not
you're
good
still
enough.
Yeah, and you're still running the app on your iPad at the same time you're running it on the screen. Different things are being shown on each screen, but it's not different apps on different screens. So
One last thing, you had told us that you upgraded your home network for the pandemic, with everybody home. Give us some details.
yeah, that was a big upgrade. I bought the Eero Pro system sort of near the beginning of the pandemic. And, we certainly quickly learned when everybody was finding their little spot of the house to be doing their online school or their online work or their online keep my sanity or whatever it was, that the internet did not work as well in some parts of my house as others. And so we bought the Eero. You need to have a mesh system to really blanket a home on Wi-Fi. And I decided to go for the Eero Pro, which is a little bit more expensive than the regular Eero, mainly because it offered a tiny bit more speed, but also the Eero Pro units have Ethernet ports in them. And I found that useful. Like, for example, back to HomeKit stuff, there are some things like Lutron that require a hub, and it just sort of worked well for me to have a Lutron hub in the same place that I had an Eero Pro. But so I have my own house wired that in, the top corner of one part of the house where I am right now in my study is where the internet comes in. And then that's on the second floor. And then on the bottom floor in the back of my house where we have our TV room, we have an Eero Pro there too. And I actually have them connected by an Ethernet line that runs outside of our house that I had somebody professionally install years ago. So those two actually have a hard connection. And then I have a third Eero Pro sort of in the middle of the house. And with those three Eero Pros, the whole house, you get super fast Wi-Fi wherever you are. And, that the 3-pack cost me $500, and which is not nothing, but boy, it was just a world change. Shortly after I bought the Eero Pro, they came out with the next version of it, the Eero Pro 6, which if you have something that works with Wi-Fi version 6, for example, the newest iPhone does, it allows for, maybe even faster speed. But I got to tell you, the speed that we get here, I think it's maybe capped. And I say that in quotes because it's not really a cap at all at 500 gigs. I mean, it is so fast that no matter where we are in the house, kids can be streaming their videos or attending online classes. And I can be using Log Me In with the firm, and my wife could be, watching a, streaming video. I mean, everything works great. And it's such a great upgrade. I wish I'd done it sooner, but I'm glad I did it when I did.
Yeah, I'm an enthusiastic Eero customer as well. I even bought a couple extra units because of the layout of our house, but I'll never understand why Apple just kind of conceded that ground.
Yeah, I used to use the airports for years. And the specific reason I used them was because as much as I consider myself a tech nerd, I hate networking. It's the one area of technology that things just don't work the way you think that they should, and it's confusing. And the airport, I mean, I used to have Apple's Airport Extremes. What I loved about them is they were good, and they were more expensive than competitors, but they just worked. I mean, it was plug and play. They worked. But then Apple, as you said, David, didn't upgrade them. Apple should have continued that line. They should have incorporated mesh technology. They should have incorporated now their HomePod technology, and it would be one of the hottest products on the internet. But they gave up too soon. I know Apple likes to limit to just have a few good things, but this is one of the cases where if I was running the company, I would have kept that one around.
Yeah, I mean it's the glue that holds your entire home network together, right? And they walked away from it.
And when you think about the options, like they could have made HomePods like base stations, like a networked Wi-Fi base station. So you could have made, you could have sold more HomePods out. I don't know. I just don't understand it. And obviously, Eero was for sale because Amazon bought them.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
They could have brought that team into Apple and done something. I don't know. That's one I'll never understand. Maybe someday we'll get the whole story. But
yeah. Speaking of something here's another one I'll throw out, something that Apple walked away from. Apple used to have its old Mobile Me service way back when, and I used to use Mobile Me. I talked about photography earlier for sharing photographs with families and friends because I would often, take pictures at events, and it gave me a nice little online place to throw stuff up. And then when Apple got out of that business back in 2012, I guess it was, I switched over to a service called SmugMug, which is great because it gives you have to pay for it. And I think I pay $85 a year. There's a cheaper version at $55, but it's a great place to put your pictures, to let all your friends and families can see the pictures. They can download the full quality versions. And most importantly, there are no ads. So this is not like, Flickr or all these other ridiculous services that, there's pop-up things trying to steal your information and getting in your way. It's just clean. It's simple. It's a great way to present photographs, and you can put them in little albums, and I have them separated into years. And now that I've been using it for 8 years now, and I have some older stuff up there too, it's like a little mini version of my photo album that's there that, I give, it's password protected, so I only give certain people access to it, but it's a great way to share pictures, pictures of kids with the grandparents sort of thing. It's fabulous for that.
have you looked at the photo sharing tools they have now, like where you can share a library, or not a library, but an album in comparison?
I find they're a little complicated, and I'm not even sure. The last time I checked that they share the full quality version of the photo when you do it that way. I know that some people use that you can have people share photos with each other, but for me, it's been more of a one-way thing. I'm putting up the pictures and other people are seeing them, and so this approach has fit my workflow better.
Yeah, and also SmugMug works better if you've got people in your circle that are not on an iPhone, that maybe have a different platform and they can't get access to those shared libraries. Well, Jeff, thanks so much for coming in and bringing us up to date with everything you're doing. I'm so impressed to hear how much you're getting done with the iPad, and you're still working on a PC and Windows at the same time. So how is Windows doing? Is Windows okay?
What can I say? I don't know. I've got the historical bias of someone that's been using Mac since the 1980s. So Windows will never. I mean, of course, Windows is better today than it used to be. But I view Windows as where I get my work done, and then I view my Apple products, whether it's my iMac or my iPad or iPhone, where I have fun getting the work done. So
there you go. Well, there you go. The website is iPhoneJD.com. It's just a great resource if you use an iPhone. It doesn't matter if you're a lawyer or not. Jeff, if you're interested in being productive with your iPhone and your iPad, Jeff has great content there every week, and I would recommend checking it out. Anywhere else people should go to check you out, Jeff?
I'm on Twitter at Jeff Richardson, which is just the place where I will occasionally post some iPhone or iPad tips. I don't post a lot. But if you like to follow websites via Twitter, iPhone JD on Twitter, every time there's a new post on the website, there is a new tweet that just automatically goes out and gives you a link.
There you go. And thank you to our sponsors, 1Password, HelloFresh, Microsoft, and Indeed. We are the Mac Power Users. You can find us on relay.fm/MPU. You can join the discussion at talk.macpowerusers.com. And we're going to go into cars and more power users today, but otherwise we'll see you next week.